My brother constantly mocked me for ending a woman's life, so I finally told our family who was really behind the wheel that night. I've been sober for 8 years, and my family still blames me for the worst night of all of our lives. 10 years ago, a girl named Bethany Hollister was killed by someone who had been drinking, and everyone in my family thinks I was behind the wheel. I was charged and went to court and did community service, and I've been called a murderer by my own relatives every holiday since. I spiraled hard after that, and drank myself into oblivion for 2 years before I finally got sober. But to my family, I'm still the screw-up who killed an innocent girl, and my brother George is still the golden child who never makes mistakes. Christmas at my parents' house started the way it always does. My mom's face tightened when I walked in, and my dad wouldn't look at me because he hasn't really looked at me in a decade. George was holding court in the living room, and when he saw me, his smile flickered for just a second. "Hey sis, glad you made it. Staying out of trouble, I hope?" Dinner was uncomfortable, and I kept my head down while George dominated every conversation about his job and his new boat and his promotion. He kept making little digs at me. "Some of us actually contribute to society. Must be nice having no responsibilities." I took it quietly like I have for 10 years. After dinner, George stood up to give a toast about family and sticking together through hard times. "We've been through a lot as a family, things that would break other people." His eyes landed on me. "But we don't give up on each other, even when some of us make mistakes that can never be fixed." Everyone glanced at me. Then he raised his glass to family and to remembering those who aren't here because of choices that can't be taken back. He was making a toast about the girl who died and looking directly at me. My uncle laughed. "Damn, George, that's dark." George shrugged. "Some mistakes follow you forever, right sis?" I was gripping my water glass so hard my knuckles were white, and I thought about that night 10 years ago. The night George came to pick me up from a party because he was supposed to be the sober one. The night he showed up having already been at his friend's place putting back beers for hours. The night he insisted on driving anyway because he said he was fine. The night he ran a red light and killed a 19-year-old girl named Bethany Hollister, who was walking home from her shift at the diner. The night he panicked and begged me to say I was driving because he had a scholarship and everything to lose. I was 17 and terrified, and I loved my brother, and I believed him when he said he'd make it up to me forever. I'd been drinking at the party too, so I blew over the limit on the breathalyzer, and that was enough. I went through the courts and the guilt of being called a murderer when I wasn't even driving. I started drinking harder to cope with carrying a dead girl's name. George went to college on his scholarship and never looked back, and now he was making toasts about mistakes that follow you forever. I stood up. "You want to talk about that night, George? Let's really talk about it." His smile froze. "I didn't think you'd want to bring that up. You know what I think about every single day? Bethany Hollister's face, her parents at the trial, the way her mom couldn't stop shaking." George shifted. "Maybe we should change the subject. But you know what I never did, George? I never drove that car." Dead silence. "You picked me up that night. You were supposed to be sober, but you'd been at Derek's house for hours. I begged you to let me call someone else, and you said you were fine." George went pale. "You're confused. You were wasted, and you don't remember it right. You ran that red light. You hit her. And when the cops came, you looked at me crying and said, 'Please, I have the scholarship. Just say you were driving, and I'll owe you forever.'" My mom's voice was barely a whisper. "George, what is she talking about? I was 17 years old. I loved my brother, and I have spent 10 years being called a killer while he built his perfect life on my silence." My dad stood up slowly. "George, tell me she's lying." George opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "Tell me she's lying." It was complicated. We had both been drinking, and I panicked. My dad's voice dropped to something terrible. "You let your sister take the fall for something you did. For 10 years. She agreed. She said she would do it. I was 17 and you were my big brother. You've spent a decade mocking me while I apologized to that girl's grave every single year." I grabbed my coat. "Bethany Hollister is dead because of you, George. They follow you now." I walked out, and the last thing I heard was my father telling George to get out of his house. I don't know if my family will ever forgive me for lying, but for the first time in 10 years, I'm not the only one carrying Bethany Hollister's name.